Buenas, buenas, buenas. I'm Vanessa, the host of Chicklet, a podcast to empower women. Each episode, I'll unlock the power of stories by exploring popular chicklet themes and use them as a starting point for insightful conversations. Today's episode is on the book Outlier by Malcolm Gladwell. So I'm going to start off the episode talking about el chisme, and I feel like this is the most concise way to describe what like achievement or a success is. It's when you have talent and also preparation. That's like the whole entire premise of this book, is that it's not just about you being able and capable to do these things. It's about the preparation as well. Having, like, let's say the education or the opportunities or the experiences that you need in order to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. Sociologists call success accumulative advantage. We cling to the idea that success is a simple function of individual merit and tend to ignore the rules society writes. Experiences and advantages play a bigger role than innate ability. So you can have all the ability in the world, but if you don't have those experiences or advantages, you're not going to be successful. For example, once you get into a fancy school or admitted into that lofty program, the only thing that separates a gifted person from other gifted people is how hard they work. So if you're in a competitive space and you have to spend 50 hours a week on, getting ready for work, working for 8 hours a day, and then coming home, you are going to be outshined by the person who is spending that time, those 50 hours that you're focusing on work. You're going to be outshined by the person that is spending those 50 hours working on perfecting that skill or that craft. So in the book, he gives 20 different stories and goes into detail of all these different examples of why that's true. One of the examples he gives is the Beatles, musicians, specifically the Beatles. He talks about some tech people, Bill Joy, and I actually mentioned that in the next episode with Pam. I thought it was Bill Gates, but reading back and recording this episode, it's actually Bill Joy that they're referring to in the tech example. He talks about this genius named Chris Langan. He's a smart guy, but his childhood did not foster that intelligence. I'm going to get more into those examples later on. He also talks about the 10,000 hour rule, and that's essentially what researchers have found. Like, that's the magic number. If you're only spending 3-4 hours a week on this one thing, this one skill that you're working on, you're not going to reach this level of excellence that you need in order to be successful in that field. But once you hit those 10,000 hours, that is what separates you from the other general population that are doing it as a hobby. Another thing that's mentioned in the book is affirmative action. And so even though academic credentials of minority students at, I think the example was in Michigan University, even though their credentials aren't as good as those as white students, the quality of the students at the law school is high enough that they're still successful. So it's they accept people with lower scores or lower grades than the white people. But at the end of the day, once they've completed the program, they're just as successful as the white people. And so that's why we shouldn't be canceling affirmative action. If we're letting these slackers in and they go to school and they do terrible at this university and they're just going to waste away these opportunities and not do them, I could see how racist people are against these programs. But we know that a lot of minorities are intentionally underserved in schools as children. We're aware of that. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're aware of that. And so it's the affirmative action is a way to mediate that. It's okay, your school was trash because we purposely did not fund you, or we purposely overfunded the police in your city. And so that's why you haven't been able to excel. So let's let you in with these poorer grades or poorer credentials. And it's been proven that when they do that, they turn out just as successful as their white counterparts. And so it just really proves that affirmative action does work, even though I know affirmative action helps white women. That's the demographic that affirmative action helps the most, is white women. So I'm aware of that. But when talking about minorities, those minorities that are helped by it, it's proven to actually make a difference. So that's why we got to keep these things alive. The other thing that they mention is that IQ is a measure of innate ability. It's just like one way to measure it, right? But social savvy is knowledge and needs to be learned. So it often feels like a secret set of rules that society has made and that you need to be exposed to. And so that's a class advantage, right? Like, I think one of the things, which I was going to talk about in Lo Malo, but I'm going to mention it here. He was saying that people of higher class, they encourage their children to present their best version of themselves when walking into rooms or when experiencing the world. Like, you go in with the best version of yourself. And I kind of resent that. Like, I don't think that poor people are out here telling their kids, like, go out there and be the worst version of yourself. No, I think that poor people have to go into rooms knowing that they're probably going to be experiencing violence in some way. It could be being taken advantage of because people view poor people as stupid. So you could be scammed. So you have to question authority. You can't trust authority. Authority could call the cops on you because, you know, you're poor and they don't trust you and they think you're going to steal. So they're going to call the cops on you. So it's like, when you're poor, you have to take care of yourself because you are more vulnerable and less trusted. Whereas rich people of a higher class, they are trusted and respected, so they're able to show this best version of themselves. And I don't think that the book, they really mentioned that. It is interesting because he is acknowledging the differences, but it often feels like it's missing the mark. It's just like you're talking about affirmative action, you're talking about the discrepancies, you're talking about how this negatively affects people, like you're talking about all the right things, but I felt like the way that he was talking about these things was not putting the blame where the blame should have been. Let's get into lo bueno. The first example in the book that he talks about, he talks about like 20 of them, but I'm only going to go into like 4 or 5 maybe. So the first one that he mentions is this town called Roseto. It's an Italian town in Pennsylvania. Whatever you're picturing of a town in Italy, like that's how it was, but they brought it to the US because a lot of them immigrated to the US at the same exact time. I think it was like 1,200 people from the city. They all moved to Pennsylvania together. And this is where Rosetans created like a powerful protective social structure capable of insulating them from the pressures of the modern world. What was special about it is that they spent a lot of time with their neighbors, just like they did in Italy. They were walking around town to, go to the market or go to the bakery or whatever. They were walking around, and it just so happened that doctors really noticed that they were a lot healthier than all of the surrounding cities. So they tested their water, they tested their air, they looked at the food that they were eating, and all of it was like the same. If anything, they were eating worse. Like they were eating like all meat, all dairy, all oil. So it's like in high quantities, which like we know now that like that's not the healthiest eating habit. But they're like, so how are all these people so healthy? And researchers found that despite having unhealthy habits, that being in community does wonders for your health. Their health was positively impacted by being in community. And so he really highlighted that like it's literally your surroundings positively impacts your health. I love that this was one of the first things that he talked about. He also mentioned that people don't rise from nothing. There are hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies that allow people to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways that other people can't. It makes a difference when and where you grew up and the culture that you belong to. The next story that he shares is about the Beatles. So the Beatles, I'm sure a lot of people know, so I don't need to spend a lot of time, mostly because it's the Beatles, right? I'll spend more time talking about the other examples that you're probably less familiar with. But the Beatles were able to become so successful, because they were able to work as musicians as their job. Like while they were performing at small clubs or they had these gigs, that was their income. They did not have to work, let's say at a factory, or they didn't have responsibilities to go home to. They were able to 100% focus on getting better. And so what was really, really special about the Beatles, especially like during this time, even today, like I really haven't heard of this, is that the Beatles, they were hired by this club to work for like 8 hours a day, I think like 7 days a week. So after months of doing this, they were working every single day, spending so much time practicing, doing covers. They were able to try things and fail. They were able to work together and create this flow, right? Like for example, if I go for a run once a month, I'm not going to be able to progress, right? But if I'm going for a run every single day, or if I'm going for a run every other day, you really start to get into the rhythm and you're able to get better at it, right? And so the Beatles is a perfect example of that. They hit their 10,000 hours, I think in like a couple years doing that residency at that bar or at that club. And so that is one of the things, right? Because there's a lot of things that go into that. Whether it's, their natural talent or that they had the money to do these things or their parents supported them. Like there's so many factors, right? But that's one of the things that they're talking about in the book that really set them apart from other people, was the fact that they were able to hit their 10,000 hours of working as a group together a lot quicker than generally anyone else. Another example was talking about Bill Joy, the tech guy that I was mentioning. There's so many things that made him able to be successful in the tech industry. And so I'm going to literally give you just a few of the examples that the book gives you that really shows why he was able to be successful, because obviously, like, there's no way to really list all of the reasons why, because so many things go into it that it's not just these 5-6 things that I'm going to mention. But Bill Joy had a stream of opportunities that came his way that granted him the ability to go down the path to become successful. The college he went to just so happened to be leading the way in computer science. He was able to spend a lot more time programming than anyone else in the country. Because they were leading the way, he had access to all these programs, and he was able to program for a lot more than, let's say, someone in like Arkansas or someone in like Florida, like someone who was just like not in the tech scene, especially like back then, like in the 50s or 60s. He was at the right place, at the right school, at the right time that they were starting to do the technology. The computer he was working on was supposed to turn off at a certain point, like let's say at midnight or something like that. But he knew the code to unlock it, which gave him even more time than anyone else, even at the school. So let's just say at the school, right, there's like, let's just say 200 people are able to be at this school. They're born at the right time. They're at this perfect school that's leading the way in computer science. He's one of only few people who know how to turn it on after hours. So he had even more time to work on this program than literally anyone else on earth. His school had enough money to keep it open all night. And I think that was something I'm glad that he mentioned, because there are, your local libraries in the hood, they're closing a lot earlier than other places because they're not getting funded in the same ways. So this guy, he was in a rich town, his school is rich. So they're like, oh, let's keep it open for the kids. And it's like, that's only afforded to people with money and with people who not heavily policed, or the police aren't terrorizing their communities. It's I kind of feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but it is a little bit of a ramble, where it's like there's so many million different things that lead up to this one point. And before he could become an expert, this Bill Joy guy, someone had to give him the opportunity to learn how to become an expert, like getting admitted into the school, right? Let's think about how many people have the talent, but their resources in their community are getting shut down a lot earlier than other people. Let's say they can't go out in the middle of the night, like I think Bill Gates did. He was going to his school nearby at like 3 a.m. Like, think about that. Like, if you're in the hood and you're walking the street at 3 a.m., like, you think a cop's not going to stop you? Yes, they are. and like what happens when that cop stops you, right? So there's so many systemic things that happen outside of just being smart enough and going to the right school and getting admitted and having this program, and all of these things have to perfectly align. Like this, the odds are so rare for all of these things to be aligning that it almost feels like the stars are aligning. Like it seems like you're in a simulation, honestly, to be this successful, right? And especially like they gave an example, that Chris Langan guy, he was super poor. Like I think that he mentioned that when he would do his laundry, he would have to stand there like naked with his brother because they only had one shirt, one pair of underwear, and one pants and one socks. So they would wash the clothes and like have to stand there and wait for the clothes to dry before putting them on. And so it's like this kid was so poor. His parents didn't show him how to advocate for himself because, you know, in the book, they were talking about how when you are affluent and you're going to, let's say, the doctor, first of all, having health insurance, right? So many people don't have access to health insurance, right? So just the act of going to the doctor, a lot of people have their first experience when they're adults, right? Whereas when you have health insurance and you have children, those children are going to the doctor from a very young age, and they're being exposed to interacting with people of authority in like a positive way. And one of the examples was an affluent family was when they were going to the doctor, they asked the kid, like, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Because when you're with the doctor, you should tell him these things. You should tell the doctor these things, right? Chris Langan, he never had that. His parents never told him like, oh, you know, when we're going to back to school night, like what questions do you have? What concerns do you have so that we can ask the teacher? Or when we go to the doctor or the dentist, like what are your thoughts? Like they never consulted with them and like had him take authority and take control of the situation, because it is talking about your body. It is talking about your grades. It is talking about your situation. And so Chris Langan never had that experience. So fast forward, he's extremely brilliant. He has, I think, a higher IQ than like Einstein, right? But just because he has a higher IQ of Einstein, he did not have the same opportunities afforded to him. So when it came time to go to college, he got into college, he got admitted to college, but he missed like a timeline for, I think it was like financial aid or something like that. Like he missed a certain timeline and he did not advocate for himself. So he had to like take time off and he wasn't able to like go to school or whatever. Fast forward, he works, he saves money, he's going to school, his car broke down. So he had to ask his neighbor for a ride to school, and then he was late. And so he asked like the administration, like, can we change the time? And he didn't say why. He just said, can we change the time? So the school sees that this kid, you know, is slacking. He failed the last semester. He took a year or a semester off, and he's the first day back and he's asking, you know, for special treatment. So they denied him. They said, no, you can't. Had he advocated for himself and shared with them and kind of taken control of the situation, which is what an affluent child or an affluent person would have done, because they've had that practice and they've had that experience, and they know that in order to get shit done, you have to share and you have to like tell people what you need. Had he done that, they might have extended his deadline. They might have switched his class to a time that was a good time for his neighbor to bring him to school. But because he didn't do any of that, because he didn't have that knowledge and that experience, he had to leave school and he never went back to school. And, you know, the researchers followed up with him several years later when he was like in his 50s, and he was fine. I think he owned a home and I think he was married and he was fine, but he was still learning and educating himself outside of formal education. And that's such a disservice to us, right? Like it's a disservice to this guy who was not able to go down the route that he could have gone down. Like let's say he could have cured cancer, or he could have like, you know, fixed any problem that we're currently having. Like instead of him being able to do that, now we're left to exist in a world where this really smart person wasn't able to contribute the way that he could have. Like we suffer in that way. Like that's why I always try to advocate for like health insurance, like universal health care, or universal education, specifically making college free. If people are able if we're giving people all these opportunities and setting them up for success, that only benefits us. Like, we would benefit from this Chris Langan guy being able to contribute to society the way that he could have to his maximum ability. But instead he was like, I don't know, let's say a plumber or whatever he was, which is fine. Not talking shit about plumbers, but it's like he wasn't doing anything innovative, right? And I think he could have. They also talk about being born at the right time, which I also talk about in my episode with Pam. But there are particular opportunities that our place in history presents us with. For example, in the late 1800s, being a kid of a New York Jewish factory entrepreneur, the Borgenite family, they had the garment making skills from back home in like Eastern Europe. So when they came to the US, they had those skills to sell garments like on the street. And then they were able to save enough money to open up a factory and hire a few people, and then eventually hiring more people and building out, scaling the company, so much so that their children were able to go to good schools and become lawyers, and they're able to progress as well. So it's like, had these garment people moved to the United States today in 2024, where we have fast fashion, which include obviously Shein and Fashion Nova and stuff like that. It also includes Old Navy. It also includes Target. It also includes Walmart. Because these people were born in the late 1800s where that market wasn't tapped into yet, they were able to tap into it and like take advantage of it. And because of that, because of the time and because of the skill and because they came to the US, like so many different things, they were able to become successful. I'm sitting here doing a podcast, right? Not that I'm even successful in it yet, but the fact that I have the ability to become successful at this podcasting, it's because I was born now. You know, if I was born in like the 20s and or even late 1800s, right? Like, I don't know, like, did we even have cars? You know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't have phones, we didn't have video, we didn't have podcasting, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Spotify. So it's like, it's all about, they mention one of the things, it's like being born at the right time. And there's so many more examples in the book too. So if you're interested in those types of examples, you should definitely read the book, because it's also like the tech boom. The people like Bill Gates and what's the other guy's name? What's the Apple guy's name? Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, right? They were born in the 50s. If they were born in the 40s, they probably would have been married and would have already had responsibilities, and they would not have been able to pursue the tech field. If they were born in the 60s, all the people that were born in the 50s, they would have already figured out the things that needed to be figured out. So that doesn't matter. It's about being born right at the right time of society's right time. Going back to the Jewish example, it's like that proves that people become successful not in spite of their humble beginnings, but because of them. Those Jewish immigrants, they were poor as hell. They were scraping pennies, trying to like feed their kids and make rent and save money. And so it's because of their skills back home, because they had to make their own clothes. They had that skill because of their poverty and being born at the right time. They found the way to scale it and make use of it. I always say the word ghetto, and I use it in a positive way, because to me, being ghetto means being innovative and creative and being resourceful. And my mom gets so mad when I use the word ghetto, or like I have some white friends who are like, oh, I can't use the word ghetto. But like, to me, it's a positive thing. There's a way to use it negatively, right? But I view it as a positive thing. So like, for example, my mom like did not have health insurance back like when she was a kid. And so when she had me and my sister, she first of all made sure that we had health insurance, and you best believe she was paying that money. So we were using that health insurance. Like, we got 2 dentist visits a year. You'd think she was paying hundreds of dollars a month, and we weren't going to use the services that it provided us. No. So we definitely went to the dentist regularly. We went to, the regular doctor to get blood work or whatever. And then once I was old enough, I started going to the gyno and following whatever orders that is. Used to be going once a year. Now they've set it every 2 years. and just taking advantage of all of that. And again, being so poor that you don't have access to health insurance, it's because of that you use that as a power to do better and to do it like in a healthier way, right? Or my mom grew up in poverty, and even being a single mom of 2 girls, like she had to buy a house by herself. She was paying rent by herself, buy groceries by herself. Like she did everything by herself, so that she had to do things the smart way. Whereas if you have money, you can be more relaxed and you might not be thinking about like how to do certain things. But because my mom struggled financially, she made sure to use everything to her advantage. For example, one of the things that she did was 401k matching. Her job would match, I think, to the dollar. So if you put $1 in, they were putting $1 in. If you put 100 in, they were putting 100 in. I think it was that. Or maybe it was half. I don't think so. I think it was $1. And she was like, what? That's free money. So she didn't make a lot of money to begin with, but she was putting, I think, like 30% of her income to hit the max, because companies will only do up to a certain amount of money a year, whether it's 10,000, 20,000, whatever the max is. So my mom hit that max every single year, especially when we were younger, because she knew that by the time it was time for her to retire, it would be so many years that it would grow and compound interest and grow so much. That lady's chilling. My mom is chilling, and it's because of the poverty that gives you like a superpower, and it makes you do ghetto things, even though I don't think it's ghetto, but like it makes you take advantage of things and make sure that you're resourceful and doing things the right way and taking advantage of it and making the best out of everything and being innovative. So I like that the book, mentioned that and called that out. Some of the lessons that I think are worth noting is that practice isn't the thing you do once you're good. It's the thing you do that makes you good. And I feel like as a kid, when you're on like a team of some sort, like your coach always tells you that, like, oh, practice like it's a game. Like you don't really pay attention to it, but it's very true. If you show up to practice for a year and every single day you're like, this is whack, this is corny, I suck, whatever, you're not going to do well. But if you show up every day trying your best, trying to learn, trying to do better, you're going to learn. And you hit the 10,000 hour rule, like we were talking about with the Beatles, in whatever field it is, you're going to be successful. At the very least, specifically, we were talking about sports, get a scholarship. If you're a girl, go to fucking golf. You know how many girls are not doing golf? Like, no girls are doing golf. So go be a girl in golf so that you can stand out because you're a girl, and you're good because you have practiced for, the past 15 years of your life. And go get that scholarship so that you can go to school for free and progress, open more opportunities as well. Another thing that they notice, I know, shout out to all my moms. You guys are killing it. You guys are trying your best. I know how stressed moms are, but I think that moms tend to add stress to their lives by themselves. Like, yes, society tells us, yes, your husband ain't shit. Like, I totally agree with all of that. But it's like, we spend a lot of time getting kids to fit into a box. It's like, if your kid wants to wear a fucking tutu every day, let that little kid wear a tutu, boy or girl, I don't give a fuck. Leave them alone a little bit. Like, don't try to control every single tiny little thing. You have to kind of let kids pave their own way and kind of take control of their lives, first of all, because you're going to want them to take control of their lives eventually, right? So when are you going to start? When they're 18? You're really going to wait until a kid is 18 to give them some type of autonomy over themselves, because you think that by the time they're 18, if that's the first time that they have control over themselves, you think they're going to do good at it? No. They need to practice having control over themselves. So practice when they're 2. I know when they're 2 and 3, they got so much to say. They want to control everything, the shoes that they wear, the jackets that they wear, the food that they eat, whatever. Choose your battles. You kind of have to let them practice taking control over themselves, because, for example, don't make your kid wear a jacket. If your kid is freaking out because they don't want to wear a jacket, fine. You don't want to wear a jacket, it's 15 degrees outside, fine. Guess who's going to ask for a jacket after 5 minutes walking outside? Your kid is. So it's like, Let them learn these things. Oh, they want to wear flip-flops in the snow? Okay, bring the boots and bring the socks because you know who's going to ask for them. So it's like, let them make these mistakes and have autonomy and have a say in things. For your own mental health, don't fight with them. And so that they can practice having autonomy over themselves and like their life so that they can be good at it. So that by the time they're 18, 20, 25 years old, they have more control of their lives and they've already done it, that they can do a better job of leading themselves. You know what I'm saying? There's different types of intelligence. There's practical intelligence. It's one that school doesn't teach you. Psychologist Robert Sternberg defines it as knowing what to say to whom, knowing when to say it, and knowing how to say it for maximum effect. And my friend Sandy from the Latina organization, I was in awe of this skill because I don't have that skill, and that is definitely something that I want. And this is a perfect example. When I was in Vegas in August, I was getting in and out of this party bus, and I broke my shoe. It was a thrift shoe, and it was beautiful, it was perfect, but it was not the shoe's fault. Like, it was because the way that I was walking, I like was pressing it up against the chair to like get up and boost myself up. So the shoe was like being stretched in a way that it couldn't. And we were going to the club. So my chancla was completely broken. Like, we tried to get a rubber band, it didn't work. And like what I did, it was literally a perfect example. There were several desks when we got into the club because the club was in a hotel. I went to one desk and I was like, hey, my shoe broke. Do you have rubber bands? And he was like, no. I was like, fuck. Okay, thanks. And then I left. And she was like, no. That's not how you do it. She was like, that's not how you do it. So she goes up to the other table, and I'm going to try my best to reenact the way that she communicated this to the second guy at the second desk, because I don't have the skill, and so I'm not able to, but I'm going to try really hard. She was like, hi, how are you? How's your night going? What's your name? Hi, Daniel, whatever his name is. My name is Sandy. This is my friend Vanessa. And I was like, hi, how are you? And he was very happy to see us. She was like, we are part of a nonprofit for Latino professionals. It's called whatever it's called, because, I don't like to say it on the podcast. She's like, are you familiar with it? And he was like, no. He was like, that sounds amazing. She was like, yeah, we're actually visiting here from Jersey. Las Vegas is amazing. Like, look how beautiful this is. I'm so blessed to be here. He was like, yeah. He was like, how can I help you? And she was like, well, my friend here, it just so happened she was walking onto the bus to get here to go to the club, and her shoe broke. And I'm not sure that we're going to be able to fix it. And, I want to make sure that we have a really nice time. There's 35 of us. The rest of the group, they continued on. And I just am wondering if you have like sandals that the hotel provides to their guests. I was just wondering if you would be able to provide that for us. I think that would be really helpful, and I really appreciate anything that you can do to help us, continue on with our night with our friends. He was like, oh, not a problem. Wow, that's insane that happened. I'm so sorry that happened. He was like, give me a few moments. Bruh, this guy he left his station and he went to the fucking cleaning ladies and he got me fucking sandals. Not me. Like, when I was talking to the guy, I literally was like, do you have a rubber band? My shoe broke. No? Fuck, okay, bye. Two totally different approaches, two totally different skills, right? Because like what I'm describing with her, she has that practical intelligence, right? I'll repeat it for you. It's knowing what to say to whom, knowing when to say it, and knowing how to say it for maximum effect. Like that, I think if you have that, that is most impactful, because you could be stupid, but if you know what to say, who to say it, how to say it, you're going to convince people. So that's something that we really need to be fostering in not only like our kids, but like in yourself too. Like that's something that I'm working on. And I know it just happened in August that like I did not do it effectively, but seeing my friend do it like really was like eye-opening for me. And it really did like show me that like I need to continue working on that skill. And stop being so like New Jersey. Like, it's very Jersey of me to be like, hey, don't want to interrupt you. Do you have a thing? Okay, cool, bye. Like, you know what I'm saying? You need to add a little bit of like spice. You need to add a little bit of like sprinkles, a little bit of confetti, a little bit of zhuzh to like really convince people to welcome them. Because if they like you and they feel for you and they appreciate, you know, they connect with you in some way, you pull at the heartstrings, they're going to give you what you want. Such a good skill. I need to practice that. I need to get better at that. So shout out to my friend Sandy for that. I kind of want to get into lo malo. One of the things that Malcolm Gladwell mentioned was that the thing that schools do, and I can speak to that, is that they separate kids based on talent, and it can be a slippery slope because if you separate the talented kids, the smart kids, right, you put them in one group and you provide them and you foster that, they're just going to get smarter. Whereas the ones that are maybe average or below average, you don't give them the stuff to foster their smartness and creativity, so they're not going to progress. If you just give the medium kids, the average kids, like just the stuff to like get by, they're not going to progress as if you were to like treat the kids that are geniuses. And like another example, a really good example of that was like the cutoff for hockey is like I think in like Canada or wherever it was like January. So if you were born in January, you were competing against kids that were born in December. So it was like a calendar year. So because you were born in January, you're older. You are maturing quicker. You're growing earlier than the kids that were born in December. And so because of that, almost like so many professional hockey players were born in January. Because from when they were 5 years old in that little league stuff, they were bigger, they were older, they were bigger, and they were treated as talented. So they were given more opportunities and they fostered that in them and put them in a special league so that they would continue to get good at it. And it's like December kids are just as good, but because they're younger and smaller, the older kids look better. And so schools do that too. Like you see that with the gifted and talented program. Kids are smart and they go down that route and then they're afforded so many more opportunities because the schools foster that in them. As teachers, you also confuse maturity for ability. As teachers, you're trained not to do that. You're trained, not to have favorites for being like the most organized or the most quiet. Like you're trained to kind of catch that and to not do those things. But it's kind of hard when the one that's quietest and following the rules, like in your heart, you're like, oh my God, I fucking love you. I wish I had a million of you, right? But you are trained to grade people, especially nowadays. Like I feel like back in the day, even like I don't know about the 90s, but nowadays it's like we have objectives and you have things that are measurable to counteract teachers just giving the most mature kids or the smartest kids good grades. Like it's like, no, did you meet the standard? Were you able to complete a 5-step multiplication problem? Were you able to do that? Yes or no? So that's what kind of one of the reasons why I like Common Core. It's like they have all these things that you have to check off the box in order to show that you met the standard, and it's a lot more measurable. Whereas I feel like back in the day, it wasn't really like that, and it was just like, oh, you're so nice, you're so cool, you're so creative, you're so organized, like here's a grade for being organized. And it's like nowadays you really can't do that. You're not giving a grade that affects their educational like outcome on like being cleanly. Like that's not at all what we're grading. So that concludes. I was going to keep talking about school, but I think January is an episode of like why all the black kids are sitting together in the cafeteria, and it's about like racism in schools. So I'll definitely talk more about that in that episode. But the next episode I'm going to do with my friend Pamela. She's the founder of Solo Para Ti. You can follow her on Instagram. You can also subscribe on YouTube or Spotify, like, comment, and leave a review. New episodes are uploaded every other Monday. You can also follow me on social media at Chick Lit Podcast. And remember, if you have any book recommendations or want to be on the podcast, let me know. Thank you for listening. Bye.